Getting pupils back to school has been in the news this week, and with a daughter in teaching, I have some sense of what this brings as a challenge. Yet learning is vital for life, and Christians have been at the forefront of education for centuries in our society because of this conviction. Yet the educational journey isn't just confined to school and university. Rather, life is God's 3S school, in which we learn God's way from strangers, from slaves, and from suffering. We can see this in the Old Testament lesson for Sunday, Genesis chapter 21, about Abram, Sarah, Hagar, and Ishmael, and Isaac. S1, learning from strangers. Abram, Sarah, and Hagar are strangers to each other's worlds, since Abram and Sarah are free and Hagar a slave. And as we see in the story, Sarah regards Hagar as a threat once she gets pregnant, despite the fact that she, Sarah, suggested that Abram sleep with Hagar in the first place. Strangers represent difference, which is easily experienced as threat, since strangers disturb our sense of control on life. The 12th century massacre of Jews at Clifford's Tower in York shows where this can lead. However, the Bible is very different. It teaches us that we should show how we love God, and if we have learned God's ways, by showing love to strangers, since God loves us as creatures who are different from him, and also loves us as people estranged from him by sin. S2, learning from slaves. Hagar is a slave with no agency, and so she gets kicked out of Abram's household into the desert with son Ishmael. Yet note how God reacts in the story. Rather than confirming Abram and Sarah's agenda, God listens to the slaves. God provides water for them and promises that Ishmael will become a great nation. That's why Hagar names her baby Ishmael, which means God has heard. God has heard the slaves' cry, just as later he would hear the enslaved Israelites cry in Egypt. And if God listens to slaves, so should we. That's why we white people must learn and listen to and from Black Lives Matter, especially given our history and the challenges of our faith. S3, learning from suffering. Suffering is threaded through this story. Sarah suffers because she can't conceive. Abraham suffers because he has no heir. Hagar suffers as a slave, an expelled concubine. Hagar and Ishmael suffer in the desert. Yet through all this suffering, they discover God is with them and bringing about blessing. Causes of suffering are complex, but the Bible shows us that suffering can become blessing. And we've seen something of this in the responses to the COVID-19 outbreak, as we've seen acts of kindness, courageous healthcare, and a return of the sense of the common good. So God's 3S school is tough. We get surprising teachers. Yet this education by strangers, slaves, and suffering is vital if we're to learn in God's school of life.